I wanted to show you sort of my journey, and I'm not using it to impress you. I'm using it to kind of show you that there's a way of navigating this. Can you throw that up in presentation mode?
Yeah. I
Okay.
was wondering if it was shared. Just let me know if you can't see it.
Yeah, we can see a corner of it. Oh, there we go. Um, but I started out. Um, my undergraduate degree is in industrial management. So on that slide, you'll see that line underneath all the logos um, related to kind of where I was in my education process. My undergraduate was in industrial management, and then you can see later on, I after I graduated, got my bachelor's. I went back and got computer science at University of New Orleans, but I was fortunate enough to get an entry level job as a student intern at the Corps of Engineers, and just luckily, they happened to be working on back then. They called it the Data Processing Master Plan. Um, so I was exposed to that, but that was actually when PCs were first being introduced into the business world, and we had one. And one of the things I did was after I worked my few hour shift as an intern, I asked if I could hang out and stay around, um, and I did, and I just learned a lot of things on my own. So you can see I, uh, I put a bullet there called "Invested in Me," and I just not only was it cool and interesting, but also I had access to equipment that others didn't. So I took the opportunity to learn more about it, and I really decided to move heavily into that computer science, that computer world. And it was an emerging market back then. And then a friend of mine approached me to take an operator job. So I worked nights at East Jefferson General Hospital in New Orleans. And while I was going to school, and luckily enough, we had some brand new equipment that wasn't in production, and it happened to be the same equipment that we use at the computer lab at University of New Orleans. So I had my own personal mainframe basically to program on for 10 hours every shift, 4 nights a week. And so again, it was a fortunate situation and allowed me to learn and play. And I had engineers on the other end of the line at the company that we were implementing the software for, so they could coach me through it. So I built a lot of relationships with this third party company. Um, and then they moved me into a management role during the days there at East Jefferson. So that was the first time I moved into a management role. One thing I may do along the way here is recommend some books that helped me along the way. There was one called the Leadership Pipeline, if you want to look that one up. But it's more of a reference book, and I think what was valuable about that is it talks you about how you go through transitions in your career, from managing yourself to managing others. And this director job at East Jefferson was that first leap to um, you know, managing a team versus just managing my work. Then I went to Children's Hospital again through the relationships of that company that I built. They recommended me for Children's Hospital. They were installing the same software package, um, and so the relationships I built said, "Hey, why don't you just talk to this guy who's a director at this other hospital?" And so I got pulled over there. Did that for 7 years, implementing not only the first network, but also the first electronic medical record. I'll go into the healthcare, the nuances of healthcare in a little bit, if you don't mind. I'll just zip through my journey here. Again, built more relationships, learned more about healthcare. The beauty of that shop is I had a total of 9 people in the shop. So I was forced to do everything. So when the third shift operator at night wanted to take some time off or was sick, I would go in and work nights. After hours, I would pull cable in the ceiling because, our budget wasn't big enough, nor did they understand the value of networking. So I did everything. I got to learn everything, every nuance of the business. And it's probably the best exposure that allowed me to be a successful CIO because I could understand pieces of the business. I didn't come up purely, for example, through the technology side, but through all the different areas, including the business and the medical records side, and the payroll and personnel side, and so on, even the telephone system. So I got to learn a lot about that. Then the head of HR at Children's, her husband worked at a manufacturing company called Latrim. You see that fourth bullet. Um, and if you guys ever want to talk about it, I'd love to. But we built shrimp peeling equipment, which sounds kind of crude, but the reality of it was 95% of the shrimp in the world back then that was peeled by machine, which was the majority of it. And what you buy in the supermarket was done on our equipment. And it's a really innovative, creative way. And you could take the shrimp right out of the ocean and dump them in our machines, and they pop out the other end, totally peeled and graded and sized and everything. So that's a really cool process. And I guess I bring that up more so to tell you that, pick up on all your experiences. So I learned a lot about processes then. So whether it was bringing a piece of raw material in the back door and turn it into a machine, or bringing a patient through the emergency room, diagnosing them, treating them, discharging them, and managing their care going forward, very similar processes along the way. Obviously, different effects. If a machine stops working, that's kind of okay. If a patient stops working, that's not so good. So you can understand the differences there. Then the same company, the software company that drugged me along to Children's, contacted me and said they needed a project manager, and that was Siemens. So I joined them, started out as a project manager, moved into sales, eventually became a regional vice president. Left there because the culture shifted. We were actually acquired by Siemens. And the culture was a lot different, less customer focused, more, revenue driven. And one of my big passions and one of my core values is, take care of your clients and take care of your people, and then the business happens. But a lot of companies have that in reverse. Then I joined IBM following Hurricane Katrina. Ochsner contacted me. They were a client of mine when I was with Siemens. And again, getting back to the relationships and the customer care, they contacted me and said, we're going to expand and we'd like you to come over and be our CIO after Hurricane Katrina. So they went from 1 hospital to 7 hospitals. We went from 20 clinics to over 80 clinics when I left in 7 years. So I got a chance to grow and build and transform a shop at Ochsner in New Orleans after Katrina. Great exercise, sprint, sucked a lot of life out of me, but it was very rewarding, not just professionally, personally, but also from a community perspective. Gave me a chance to give back to my community. Then you got a call from MD Anderson, and I remember during the interview process, they said, why are you leaving Ochsner? I say, I'm not leaving Ochsner, I'm coming to MD Anderson because having the chance to do in the cancer community what I did post-Katrina, as far as transformation and improving, was something I couldn't pass up. So that's when I joined MD Anderson, took them through a major transformation from being more technology and homegrown software to being more of a service-focused organization. Then, as you can see, I jumped into the CEO role at a startup. I've been working with them for way back in my Ochsner days. And then they needed to grow beyond just being a startup. And so they moved into growth stage. And then they became, more of a production shop and less of a software development shop. So I decided to step aside and let my number 2, who was really good at business development and sales, to take over. So I decided to step down, and now I'm at Memorial here in Gulfport. Feels really good to be closer to the front lines, especially with the COVID situation. And anyway, that was sort of a long journey. Along the way, I think it's most important, like I said, to learn and learn well. Some of my best learning experiences were from some of my worst situations and worst leaders. I quickly realized that's not how to do things, and how it impacted me, and how, I didn't necessarily like that scenario and like that focus. So I would make personal decisions to move on. Why don't you go to that bullet list, Presley, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you, Chris, but do you want me to, can everyone still see Chris if I start this as a slideshow?
They're saying, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
you can see him.
Sean gave us thumbs up, so we're good. Thanks, Sean. But anyway, these are just some things to consider, and I'm not gonna read through them, but you can. And then I want to make a couple of comments and then pull you guys into the conversation if that's okay with you. My screen just popped off. So, I mentioned the core values there. You're going to be challenged throughout your career to do things. And just stay true to your core values, because that's your character. That's what makes you. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. I'm not talking about ethical or illegal things necessarily, but even those situations may pop up. But for you to be happy and enjoy and prosper in your career, in my opinion, it's staying close to those core values. Presley mentioned the mentoring. I brought a comment up to him when we were prepping for this, is also try to find a sponsor. A sponsor is someone that will drag you along. And I have several, maybe a dozen in my career that would just pick me up and pull me along. That would say, okay, Chris, I'm going to put you here and I'm going to make sure that you attend this course, and, I'm going to give you this stretch assignment. So it's not about just getting advice. It's also getting those legs up. And, if you look at my journey again, I don't want you to flip back, Presley, but there's only twice that I actually used a recruiting firm to get those roles. Every one of those roles I got was either through a relationship that I had built, or through things that people heard that I had been involved with, and it just works out well. So expand your network and focus on that as much as possible. And if you want, we can talk a little bit about that. The other bullet I want to bring up on here is, maintain that work-life balance. If you can see on my journey, there were some times in there where I had a lot of opportunity to move around and move up, but I passed on it so that I could spend more time with family. And actually, one of the big reasons, and it was very fortunate that I had this opportunity to come to Memorial, so I can be closer to home and get off the road a bit and see my grandkids more. So I'm going to pause, since I know we're short on time, and this is, at the end of the day, it's really about you. What can I answer, or what can I help you with?
I've got a question, Chris, because
Sure, Presley.
I think yesterday in the presentation, the speaker brought up networking also, and how important it is. And, your network is your net worth, and who you know, not what you know, some of these cliche things, but maybe share with the group some suggestions on ways to network, to get involved, to expand your network. Most of these guys and girls are starting their career. So, I would guess, and they have better questions than me, that they might not know where to start outside of Talent Path.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious thing is to look at associations and affiliations and opportunities to join groups. You have many more tools at your hands now, especially with social media, and you have the ability to network a lot better. But the other thing is, set your brand, kind of create your own brand. Especially now with the virtual working and working remote, and the way, especially in the software world, where you develop and you're asked to do something, and you really at times never get to meet anyone. So I think one of the things I learned is raise your hand and ask for help, even if you may or may not need it. So go back and say, hey, I wrote this code, or I did this analysis. What do you think of it? And just build your brand and force yourself to communicate with others. Again, I don't know what situations you're in right now or where you're going to start, but it may be more difficult than not to to have those conversations. So, but find ways of making that work. Go the extra mile. If you're fortunate enough to get into a company like a healthcare organization, there's usually a lot of opportunity to volunteer outside of your domain. So, for example, if you're in IT, step outside and, right now they're looking for screeners, for example, as patients come in the door. Volunteer your time, and invest in yourself, and that's really your time. So those are some things, but the typical associations, find out what works, and just like I did with myself, I say, I really like this PC thing, so I jumped into that. I can't tell you when I was first a CIO at Children's Hospital, how many times I would just come home with just books and manuals in the old day. Now everything's online, right? And my wife would just light me up because she's like, what are all these manuals? Why don't you just read like a normal person? I think that's just not how I'm wired. So does that make sense?
Absolutely. We've got, and I'll play moderator for a second. And when anyone has questions, I'll just call them out. So I don't know if it was Trevor or Kyle first, but go ahead, Trevor.
And Kyle was first if he wants to go.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Trevor. I appreciate that. Good afternoon or good morning, Chris. I appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your day to spend with us, imparting some of your knowledge. My name is Kyle. I'm a business analyst here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned when you were kind of going over your career timeline. Sorry, what was that?
Go Saints.
No way.
Not a Falcons fan,
rise up. Dirty Birds all day.
Well, whatever.
It's all good. But anyway, you mentioned earlier in your career, you kind of did a few different things to kind of get into technology. You were working, on networks and physical infrastructure at some point. What was that early career moment where you kind of found what you were really passionate about in technology and decided to dedicate your career down that path? Could you maybe talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, great question. I don't know if it was a moment or it was a trend because and it took me a while to not only realize that that's, how do I want to say it, that's what I do, but I think that people transformation thing has really clicked for me. And it sometimes it wasn't until after I left an organization and I looked back and saw that they were much better off. I think you're going to gravitate to it. And that's one of those signals that's going to be presented to you and signs along the way, whether you get an award for, the quality of your work, or you get recognized, or someone calls you and says, hey, why don't you apply for this job? Those are the kind of signals. Just pay attention to those, because that's probably what you're good at. It may not be what you feel you're good at, but that's what others perceive you to be good at. And don't miss those little windows. When I still have really good friends at Children's Hospital, for example. We get together a couple times a year, definitely around the holidays, and we just maintain those relationships. And we talk about the good work we did back there, but it wasn't me doing the good work; it was us. And I had a mentor one time, and Dr. Frances Fry from Harvard. She used to come visit us at Ochsner all the time, and she had a great saying that says, build teams that thrive in your presence and survive in your absence. And I don't know if that was her saying, actually. I think it was a Simon Sinek saying. But anyway, those kind of things stick. And I think that's where I gravitated to. So find out what it is for you. It could be, it could be just rocket science kind of code work. It could be deep dive into analytics and data science. I'm a closet data scientist at heart, which, it's not what I'm paid to do, but man, I love it. So anyway, keep your eye out for those signs and they'll come at you.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Don't try to force it. I'm actually talking to another friend of mine right now who's probably about your age and where they are in their career. And he's trying to force it a bit. You got to let a little bit of this flow. Occasionally take one step back to take two steps forward. If you think about it, my healthcare journey took a step back when I went into manufacturing, but it was a major step forward in my understanding around processes and so on. That was probably the best investment of time I could make was moving over there. Not to mention it was fun and cool. I do want to talk to you about shrimp peeling, by the way.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. It was a great answer.
Okay. Other questions?
All right. I guess I'll go now.
Hey, Trevor.
I'm Trevor Taylor. At the Houston location, I'm a full stack engineer.
What part of Houston?
Just north of Houston, Tomball area.
Yep.
Yep. Actually, my dad actually works at MD Anderson. So when you said that you were a CIO there, I was like, oh, maybe you've interacted with him because he was actually in the IT department.
Yeah. Is he in IT?
Support. Yeah, he did the PISA support for a while, and now they're doing
sure.
big. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So
good. Yeah, I was there during that. I was there during the Epic conversion. So
yeah. So he probably knows you. But my question is, when it comes to like finding mentorships and sponsorships, how does one go about doing that? Because I've had a lot of people where I'm like, oh, this person would be a great mentor, but it's just something like, hey, would you like to be my mentor? Or is there some kind of way to really let them know you want to be a mentor, and what does that involve on both our side and their side in terms of?
Yeah, great question. First of all, it's direct and indirect, probably as much, maybe more indirect than not. Just observe people that you value or share the same interests, and just observe and be around them. Attend, their meetings if you can, and then approach somebody. And I don't know what your hit rate's going to be. Sometimes, sometimes it'll just blow you off, but just ask. And but it's okay if not. You can still watch them and read about them, and especially now with social media, there's so much happening kind of in real time. You can kind of cast a bigger net. The most important thing when I interact with someone, and I've been doing it forever, is it's got to be a two-way street. It's got to be, and Presley, you know where I'm going with this, is when we met, I learned as much from him as anything. Another really good friend of mine who, he started out as a mentee or a protege, or whatever you want to call it. But now he's a personal friend of mine, and most of the time that's how it works. And he ended up, I told him, I said, it started back when he was in his 20s. I said, you're the youngest professional coach ever, because he would just poke me in the eye. He'd sit in a meeting with me one time, and he'd say, man, you were kind of a jerk in there. And so I got a lot. Don't do that all the time, by the way. Be very selective when you use that term. But yeah, it's a two-way street. So someone's got to be receiving of it and willing to put in the same amount of time. But Presley and I used to meet once a month for breakfast, and I won't tell him, but he even offered to pay me. I was like, no. I said, let's just have breakfast. But that was a way to get me to the table. Basically, I think your tagline was, you want to earn some bucks or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, I knew of Chris before we got to know each other, and had seen him speak at HIMSS events and other sort of things. And sometimes, and I'm sure Chris will mirror this, and if he doesn't, it's fine too, but sometimes you just got to be out there if you're reaching out to someone that you don't know. And so I knew Chris was probably hit up when he was at MD Anderson all the time, but I wasn't trying to get into MD Anderson. That wasn't my main motivation. My main motivation was to surround myself with people that knew more than I did, that could influence me in a positive way. And so he's absolutely right. I think I did offer to pay you, and obviously you said the first one's on me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not creepy, by the way, to ask, would you be willing to chat with me every now and then? So don't hesitate. And I think that's one of the lessons I learned over my career. Just, I tell people all the time, there's always 2 or 3 more questions you can ask anyone, even when you're, asking for help. So just go in and say, tell me how you got there. Would you be willing, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Can I meet you for breakfast? Can I have a phone call with you once in a while? Just keep asking. The worst thing you're going to get is a no.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
And if you do get a no, you don't want them anyway. So, what else?
Chris, or is it Chris? Go ahead.
Christopher.
I think Sean had his hand up before me. You can go ahead, Sean.
Nice.
Thank you, Chris. And also thank you, Chris, for being here with us today. My name's Sean Blaylock. I'm a business systems analyst here in the Houston office.
Got it.
So I noticed when you were talking about your kind of when you were getting started, you had your interests in PCs, and then you got to play with those a little bit, and you got to work with the mainframes when you were learning your coding and things like that. Which seems like you kind of had your interests, and then as time went on, you were able to translate those interests into positions where those were upcoming technologies. And so I wonder if you might have just a couple of technologies that you see sort of lying in the future. We can access data and learn about things so much more easily. We don't have to get jobs with mainframes and that sort of thing. But you have a couple of technologies that maybe we could focus on, because one of the problems we have in our field is that there are just a plethora of technologies to choose from. But say if we wanted to go into healthcare, where might we be looking?
Yeah, I suggest you learn as much about the business, and as in a systems analyst role like you're in, probably, I don't know exactly what you're working on, but the more you learn about the industry, the better. Especially healthcare, two of the fastest changing industries, healthcare and technology, and kind of I'm right in the middle of both. So things are changing so fast, and you don't want to be the 50 or 60-year-old mainframe guy and mainframes go away. And I'm sure that's why you're asking the question. I would say just don't worry about it. Just pursue the business. And then I think what I look for as an IT leader is someone that can map the business outcome to the technology. So many times we make the mistake of leading with technology. How many times you get into a room, and it happened to me literally, I got to whisper because my door's open, but literally twice yesterday, where they wanted to start with technology. We're getting into, obviously with COVID, more and more this telehealth where, you can do patient visits and patient monitoring remotely without them having to come to the facility. And, that they immediately start about with, okay, well, we need to do demos of products. It's like, no, it's a process change. You probably feel that frustration all the time where they're like, let's build a database, or let's build a web page, or let's build an application, or let's put it on mobile. Yeah, that's the means to an end, but focusing on the end game, I think, is where we can add the most value. Definitely in healthcare. Healthcare is dominated by pretty much packaged systems. Very little, development is occurring now, and if so, it's very behind the scenes and more on the integration and interoperability side. But don't, just watch yourself. I mean, don't get hung up on and be more or less typecast as being the Java guy or so just, keep your eye on again, look for the signs out there, focus on the business, in my opinion.
Thank you.
And I did that, I want to make sure that the full stack, developers and coders don't worry about that either. You'll get your opportunity to jump out. I started programming in Pascal, frankly, and Fortran when I was in engineering, and that quickly morphed. But the syntax and the different languages is the easy part to learn. To me, it's the logic, and you guys already have the logic. When you put code together and put the pieces together, you're already understanding how it works. So understanding the logic, and you can train, yourself on any kind of new language and development technique. And by the way, it applies across the board. That same logic applies whether you're making business decisions or coding decisions. So you guys are learning more than you probably appreciate. Just just hang in there. At your age, you're ready to move fast, and at your position in your career, you're ready for the next level. But be patient. It'll come to you. All right, Christopher, you're up.
Good morning, Chris, and thank you for taking the time to share some of your knowledge with us today. My name is Chris Prosser, and I'm a business systems analyst here in the Atlanta Talent Path office. And I wanted to start by just sharing that my father started his career off working for Siemens in the healthcare division. And was that the division that you worked in as well?
Well, there was two. I started out in the software group. It was originally a company called Shared Medical Systems, and we were acquired by Siemens. But Siemens also was pretty heavy in the radiology equipment and patient monitoring side. So we joined that group, trying to kind of integrate the equipment with the information system. So, but it was big. I think we had Siemens is, like 450,000 employees worldwide.
Right. Yeah. I don't
have a Christmas party.
We lived in Wisconsin at the time, so it's
Yeah.
probably unlikely.
So you were probably in the medical equipment side. Yeah. Or he was.
He was. He started off as a technician on the equipment and has since moved into like marketing and project management and stuff for different companies now. But
good.
I've met a lot of people that he's worked with in the radiation oncology industry, I guess, and they've all mentioned that working in the healthcare industry is really great and rewarding, and they just said that that's their advice was that's the way to go to me, because they knew I was kind of at a place in my career where I was looking to make a change. This was before I joined Talent Path. And I was wondering, since you have sort of a mixed bag of experience in and outside of healthcare, if is that your take on it as well?
Yeah, it's definitely a passion, and I appreciate it. In manufacturing, one of the things I did not enjoy was the fact that I made machines, and I'd go to work and say, hey, what did we do yesterday? And say, well, we made a machine. And what did we do today? Well, we're going to make another machine. And if we're lucky tomorrow, we'll make two machines. And while there's nothing wrong with that, and I had a lot of fun trying to optimize that process, there's nothing like interacting with with the patient side of it for me. My wife and my daughter were both NICU nurses and actually still are. So going and visiting them, and they actually worked at Ochsner, so I'd go visit them, and then I'd see what they did every day, and how a newborn baby sometimes is often less than a pound or a pound and a half, and what they did for that baby, and having the opportunity to help them, because I could never do what they did, but having the opportunity to help them do better, and helping a physician, at MD Anderson, for example, see one more patient. And if you think about it, we had 1,000 physicians, and if I can make that physician more efficient and they could see one more patient a week, that's 50,000 patients that could have the MD Anderson experience just because of some of the technology. And, you walk the halls, and I used to do that all the time. Whenever I thought I had a bad day, I'd go walk the halls or visit my wife in the NICU and realize I don't have a problem. I've got a job. I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and these people are fighting the battle of their life often, or the babies and the parents are dealing with major life issues. So, you can't. That experience is really important to me, and that's one of the reasons I actually came back to Memorial, is to get closer to the front line, and how can I impact our community better. So I also realized late in my career, I think it was you, Trevor, you asked, what's happening, or when did you realize it was especially, and I quickly realized that I've got to be tied to some kind of mission and some kind of outcome, and to me, healthcare is my passion. So, and I did a lot of volunteer work outside, fundraising for Children's Hospital, a lot of fundraising and programs at MD Anderson. Still one of my favorite places ever. So, yeah, it's very rewarding. But you can also pick up that passion in other ways. If you're very focused on innovation, you can get into that. And there's a lot of industries that are innovating. There's other motivating factors, but healthcare is mine. Radiology is real interesting. That's they got some cool technologies over there. That's real science. But one of the things that clicked for me when I worked for Siemens is like I used to think I was, computer science and I was doing some big stuff. No, these guys are doing physics and they're targeting tumors the size of a needle head and hitting it with a proton beam. I was like, yeah, well, I don't do that. I collect data, I store data, and I give it back to people. So that was very humbling, by the way.
Yeah, I was impressed with the physicists that I met
Oh.
too.
Yeah. And then the equipment is just so impressive, especially like magnets and stuff like that. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, the company my dad works for now, he left Electa Oncology and joined a startup called Acasis, and they just got their 510K clearance for something that's gonna compete with the I think linear accelerator that Electa makes.
Yeah. The linear accelerators are used in cancer care and targeted therapies and things like that. It's really impressive. But then you look at how the information, the speed of what we do. Getting back to the IT side, the performance of that machine is directly related to how much information you can get there and is it there on time. So getting the patient demographics, making sure that all the authorizations are approved by the insurance company. That's what we do. We connect those dots because, it's not just providing that treatment, but is the patient even eligible for the treatment? Have they been irradiated lately to understand and say, okay, I've drawn too much blood from them or I've irradiated them. How do you connect them with clinical trials? So if their treatment isn't working, how do I get them into another protocol? That's the cool side of things is how do you connect all those dots? And that's what we do in healthcare IT. What else can I help you with? I'll stay with you as long as you guys need me or want or until the Teams cuts us off. So what cool things are you guys working on?
Don't be shy.
Well, right now we're working on a project where we're doing a sentiment analysis for
Nice.
Product reviews on Amazon. So a lot of us are working with Python and stuff like that to kind of create scripts that'll go through and parse the data.
Yeah, that is so cool. And, I think someone asked about emerging technologies. I think the whole AI, ML world is the most exciting thing I've seen in a while. I'm actually on the board of a startup. They were the original IBM Watson team, and they spun off and started their own company based out of Austin. We had Watson and MD Anderson, a little bit of a false start. Again, we led with technology. We literally said, hey, let's buy IBM Watson and cure cancer. I was like, yeah, that's kind of a good lofty idea, but there's some other things that we can do with it along the way. And that part of it failed miserably. And it was not about the technology or the team that worked on it. It was around the vision. And, we had crappy data, Kyle. And you know what I'm saying? Crappy input data just, and we spent years trying to curate the data. And what we should have done is say, okay, let's start from scratch and get good data from here on out versus trying to back our way into it. And it gets back to your business analyst guys is how do you see the bigger picture of things? So, when I implement a transactional system like an EMR or a accounting system, how do I not only build it for the purpose we bought it for, or did it for, but how do I get it to feed and have secondary uses of the data? I mean, those things throw off a lot of data exhaust that, guys like you, Kyle, and others can ingest and just come up with some amazing insights. So let me tell you, we even though he had a Watson failure, I quickly realized that the cognitive computing world was a major game changer. And so me and a buddy of mine, Presley, Mike Antonoff, he's now on the faculty at Rice University teaching it. But we jumped in and we created a lot of these little use cases, and we didn't go around saying everybody, hey, this is AI. We just went around and created these really cool solutions that people used, and nobody knew what was in the background. Who cares about what it is? Who cares if it's Watson or an AWS or a Google Mind or anything like that? We just had an outcome, and we did a little bit of everything. One of the things we built was a cognitive help desk, which is an easy solution to build, where a nurse would just start interacting with the machine and saying, how do I order gloves? And we knew where they were. We knew who they were by their profile, and we knew all the tip sheets. So we just tee up this information for them and give it to them in context. So while they were in the OR, while they were in the treatment room, we could get those gloves to them quicker rather than them having to get out of where they were, call somebody, log into another system, procure it, and so it was pretty cool stuff. The other thing that I thought was cool is we built getting back to the patient care side, and you guys cut me off, but I could talk all day about this. But we had a patient concierge system that we built that allowed patients to help them through their journey with cancer. So again, we did this in about a 90-day sprint, but what we did is we knew about the patient. So a patient would be coming in for an appointment. We knew where they lived. We picked up certain things from them, not necessarily social determinants, but we would pick up things like they have a pet. And we knew from their type of cancer where they were in their journey, because we had all that in the EMR. We knew that they would probably be in Houston for a while. So we said, here are some living arrangements that are pet friendly. We knew their dietary restrictions. Again, this was all driven through our cognitive engine. We knew they had dietary restrictions, whether it's because of their ethnicity or habits, or maybe even because of their illness. And we'd say, here's restaurants in the area that have it. We had one scenario where we knew this guy was a basketball fan and the Rockets were playing the night of his appointment. And we said, here's a link to StubHub. So again, it's how do you make the journey better? It's not just about what you do as an industry, but how do you add value to their life as they're going through this event? And that felt real good. So, and we did, Mike and I talked to him last night, actually. We still have a list of about 150 use cases that we want to get out there. And they're very, I don't want to say simple, Kyle, sorry, but it's not simple, but it's very achievable. And we decided that everything we did, we wanted to do in 90-day sprints, because anything longer, it loses its steam. Now, interestingly enough, the patient concierge application we built took us 90 days to build, took us 18 months to implement, because it had to go through legal and compliance, and our marketing department had to say, oh, we're not in the real estate business or the restaurant business. And finally, the president stepped in and says, yeah, but it makes the patient's life better. Let's just do it. So, again, that's the bottleneck we run into in IT. That cognitive stuff is real cool. Really, they're using it a lot in now connecting patients across the continuum. So Epic is one of the big EMR, electronic medical record providers in healthcare. And what they're doing is allowing organizations to connect. So they have a system called Patients Like Mine. So you can go onto this community and say, I have a patient that just presented with this lump in their neck, and just, help the diagnosis. So it's more of a community of care versus just an institution of care. I get fired up about this stuff. So all you gotta do is plant the little seed about things, I'll just go. Trevor?
Yeah, I was just going to say, for the full stack engineers, we're actually doing kind of a workplace simulation right now, because a lot of us haven't been in those kind of situations. So we're running through week-long sprints, and we're creating a e-commerce like website similar to Amazon or something you might see online. And it's really neat, because we've been taking slices of the entire stack. So we each take, front-end elements, our server element, and the database, and we have to connect each module that way. And so it's been really interesting to see the different challenges that each of us have faced and how we've overcame them through various implementations of different, little pieces of code here or there, or just, collaborating with each other and helping each other overcome. So it's been a really interesting experience and journey.
Right after I left MD Anderson, I had a little dead air time. So I said, let me get back into the coding business and see what that's about. Holy crap. You guys can develop stuff in hours that would take me literally weeks. I was doing some simple stuff that, like I wanted to sort this one column and it's just a setting. I'd have to write like raw code back in the day to go through different sorting algorithms and stuff. I'm dating myself. Don't feel sorry for me. I'm just pumped that you guys can crank out the code a lot faster now.
Yeah, I think this has been like 3-4 weeks now, and we're pretty much at a good point where it looks like an e-commerce site, and it's neat to see how little pieces can come together to create something bigger and have that experience. So that's what
one of the things that we realized when we were doing a lot of our things like patient concierge is, the big sets of data are the obvious ones, who the patient is, where they are, what is their treatment plans. But then when you supplement that with some of this, I used to call it just gap data, man, you can derive a lot of good insights from that. When, for example, I had a project at Ochsner where I told my data scientist, I was like, just go out and get the weather data. And he said, why? I said, just go do it. It's free. Go to NOAA and get it. And he did. And we pulled it in. I said, now, so we had a contract, or we had an arrangement to be the provider of choice for the local high school athletic department. And, what we were able to do is we knew, and through the patient portal, we were able to build a communication mechanism, not only with the athlete and the kid, but also the parents. And so we knew that the patient was administered an inhaler, for example. We knew that they were in the athletic program because we had that information. We knew that they carried around a mobile phone and had the Ochsner app on it. But then now that I had the NOAA data, I could find out what the heat index or the pollen count. So I said, okay, let's connect the dots and proactively send a notice. Hey, don't forget your inhaler today. The pollen count's high. Or don't forget to hydrate. Heat index is high. And then it saved ER visits. It saved them from missing school. It obviously saved them from having a healthcare event. It prevented mom and dad from having to miss work to take care of the kid. So life is good. Not to mention it's just the right thing to do. But again, that little piece of gap data that we pulled in, you just got to think bigger. Pulled in phone data, phone switch data. Interestingly enough, we pulled in the death registries, which are pretty easy to get. At MD Anderson, when we would do a mailing for a cancer screening, for example, we obviously did not want to send something to a patient that had passed away, but we didn't know at MD Anderson unless we went outside and found out that, because the patients don't always obviously die at our place, but we don't want to do those interactions, so we would just pick up those kind of gap pieces of data. Think about that. It's a lot easier to access than you think, and most of the time it's pretty cheap, if not free.
Thank you.
And then with your magic, you guys can derive a lot of good insights from even if you could access a patient's claim, basically what did they pay for from the insurance claim. Think about how you could back your way into understanding, what other things are going on with that patient based on that. Like I said, the rescue inhaler basically came from the claim.
Well, claims data is the most cleanest view of a patient journey. But it can be difficult to access from a hospital unless it's de-identified. So I don't know, any recommendations where if they wanted to play around with some data where they could access claims data?
Yeah, go to the government, go to CMS, the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services. They, interesting enough, you can get a lot of good information there. you're going to have a connection. They're not just going to freely give up every piece of information, but if you're working on a project, you can typically get it.
Good advice.
Hey, what else can I do for you?
We've had you for an hour, Chris, already. We won't keep you much longer, but absolutely, if anyone else has
Please
any
don't make me
questions.
go back to work. Please don't. I'm kidding. Well, you guys have fun. Enjoy the journey. It goes by really quick. It feels like just yesterday I was sitting in your chairs, hammering out code in a closet somewhere, and you'll mark your course. You're in a great field. The doors will open up, and you'll decide what direction you take, and just don't ignore the signals. I can't tell you how many of them I did in my career. Now that I'm looking back, I'm like, oh, I could have gone that way. So doesn't mean you take every one, but you also, I was telling someone today, you don't have to turn down a job until you actually get an offer. So don't think that you're either not going to get it or you don't want to take it, because sometimes it's better than you think. That was my parting shot. Good luck, guys. If I can ever help, let me know.